This portrait of two siblings looks sweet until you see how he's touching her shoulder. The spring morning brought an unusual warmth to the Atlanta History Center, where Dr. Marcus Webb had spent the last 6 months curating an exhibition on African American communication methods during and after slavery. The collection had grown beyond his expectations. Quilts with encoded patterns, songs with hidden meanings, even seemingly innocuous household items that carried messages only the initiated could understand. But this photograph, delivered just yesterday from a private estate sale, demanded his immediate attention. The portrait showed two young people, clearly siblings, posed in the formal style typical of 1903. The young man stood behind his sister, both dressed in their finest clothes. His suit was well tailored, suggesting a family of some means, and her white blouse was adorned with delicate embroidery. Their expressions were solemn, as was customary for photographs of that era, but their eyes held a clarity and intelligence that seemed to reach across the decades. Marcus had examined hundreds of similar portraits, but something about this one unsettled him. He couldn't quite identify what it was until he looked away, then back again. That's when he saw it. The brother's hand rested on his sister's shoulder in a way that seemed natural at first glance, but the more Marcus studied it, the more deliberately strange it appeared. The fingers weren't relaxed. They were positioned with precision. The index and middle fingers extended fully, the ring finger bent at the second knuckle, the pinky slightly curved, and the thumb pressed firmly against her shoulder. This wasn't the casual touch of a protective brother. This was a message. He reached for his phone and pulled up reference photos he'd compiled over months of research, images of hand signals used by conductors on the Underground Railroad, gestures employed by freed people seeking lost relatives, and the subtle codes developed by black communities to navigate the increasingly hostile landscape of Jim Crow America. Nothing matched exactly, but there were similarities. He turned his attention to the index card attached to the photograph. Robert and Grace Thompson, Atlanta, Georgia, June 1903. Photographer, J.B. Harrison Studio, estate of Florence Thompson Henderson. It wasn't much, but it was enough to begin. Marcus opened his laptop and searched census records. Thompson was a common name, but he had 2 first names and a date. Soon, the records appeared. Robert Thompson, 18. Laborer Grace Thompson, 15. Student parents, Samuel and Ruth Thompson. Address, 127 Auburn Avenue, Atlanta Auburn Avenue. By 1903, fast becoming the economic and cultural heart of Black Atlanta, a place where businesses, churches, and social institutions were rising in defiance of segregation, terrorism, and voter suppression. A beacon of determination amid violence, poverty, and Jim Crow. And the Thompsons lived right in the center of it. Marcus dug deeper. Property documents showed Samuel Thompson owned a small grocery store, modest but stable income for a black family in 1903. Enough for food, enough to survive, enough to be free in ways many weren't. Grocery stores, Marcus knew, were more than places to buy food. They were hubs of information, meeting points, covert communication centers dating back to the Underground Railroad. Why would 2 siblings from such a family pose for a portrait with a coded hand signal? What message were they sending? And to whom? He emailed Dr. Patricia Lawrence of Spelman College, attaching the photograph and describing the unusual positioning. While waiting, he tracked down the estate contact, Florence Thompson Henderson. An obituary revealed she had died 6 months earlier, survived by her daughter, Linda Henderson Carter, a retired schoolteacher living in Stone Mountain. Marcus sent an email introducing himself, explaining the photograph, and sharing his suspicion that Robert and Grace may have played a role in a hidden communication network. Patricia wrote back almost immediately, "Marcus, fascinating. I don't recognize the gesture, but 1903 was a pivotal year in Atlanta. Family reunification activism was strong, with many still searching for relatives separated during slavery. Also rising fear over orphan trains and indenture schemes that were effectively re-enslaving black children. If Robert and Grace were part of that work, they would need covert methods of identification. Let's meet tomorrow. Before Marcus could even process the excitement, another email arrived from Linda Henderson Carter. Dr. Webb, I'm glad you reached out. My grandmother told stories about Robert and Grace. She said they were bridges who helped broken families find their way home. I have a box of letters and documents she asked me to keep safe. You may want to see them. The next morning, Marcus drove to Stone Mountain. Linda greeted him with warm eyes and a firm handshake, eyes that reminded him immediately of Grace in the photograph. She led him into the dining room, where a simple cardboard box sat waiting, unopened for decades. I pulled this down from the attic last night, she said softly. I haven't looked at most of it since my grandmother passed in 1994. She made me promise to keep it safe. Linda sighed. Grandma said it was important history, but she died before she could explain everything properly. Marcus sat down carefully as Linda poured the tea. What did your grandmother tell you about Robert and Grace? Linda wrapped her hands around her cup, warming herself with the memory. Grandma Florence was Robert's granddaughter. She said Robert and Grace were just teenagers when they began what she called the finding work. She also said it wasn't safe to speak of it openly, even decades later, because families still carried shame about what had happened. Shame about what? Marcus asked softly. Shame about losing their children, Linda said, her voice dropping. After slavery ended, people scattered, searching for work, for safety, for the family they'd been separated from. In all that chaos, children disappeared. Some were taken by former enslavers who claimed guardianship. Some were placed in orphanages or sent away on trains to be indentured labor elsewhere. Parents spent years searching, but the system was designed to make those children vanish. A cold heaviness settled in Marcus's chest. He knew the history, apprenticeship laws that mimicked slavery, orphan trains that transported children like property, legal loopholes that kept families forever apart. Robert and Grace helped reunite those children, he asked. That's what Grandma said. They were part of a network, people who could move without attracting attention. Teenagers could pose as workers or servants, travel between towns, gather information. They found where children were taken, then passed word to families. Linda opened the cardboard box. Inside lay ribbon-tied letters, a small journal, yellowed newspaper clippings, and sepia photographs. This is Grace's journal, she said, sliding it toward Marcus. Grandma never figured out how to read it. She said it was written in code. Marcus opened it gently. The pages were neat but cryptic. Dates, initials, numbers. June 15th, 1903. RMT to visit. 3 packages. Auburn delivery successful. Hands remember. Hands remember. Marcus looked up, heart speeding. The photograph. The hand on the shoulder. Linda nodded. Grandma said they had their own language. The next day, Spelman College. Patricia Lawrence's office was overflowing with century-old documents. When Marcus arrived with digitized journal pages, she had already cleared space. I've been thinking about this all night, she said. Show me everything. Marcus displayed the portrait and journal notes. Patricia leaned close, studying Robert's hand. Look at this, she said, flipping through her research notebook. 15 years ago, I interviewed a woman, Mrs. Henrietta James, age 97. Her grandmother was part of what she called the locator network. She showed me hand signals they used to identify members. She turned to a page of sketched hand positions. This one was called the bridgekeeper sign. Index and middle fingers extended meant safe passage. Patricia demonstrated, placing her hand exactly as Robert had in the photo. Marcus felt something click. And the bent ring finger? The curved pinky? Mrs. James said additional finger shapes added meaning, Patricia replied. A bent ring finger indicated covenant, an oath. A curved pinky meant protection or guardianship. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. So Robert's hand could mean safe passage, sworn promise, protection. Exactly. A credential, a pledge, a warning to anyone who meant harm. Decoding Grace's journal. Working side by side for hours, Marcus and Patricia began unraveling the code. Initials, family names, numbers, children's ages, locations disguised as everyday references. Packages always meant children. Entries slowly revealed the scale. July 18th, 1903. 3 packages, ages 6, 8, 10. Charleston origin. Father searching 4 years. Conductor MB confirmed. Route through Augusta. Hands remember. Risk high. Patricia exhaled, shaken. 3 children missing for 4 years. Robert and Grace were arranging their return. Marcus scrolled. August 2nd, 1903. Packages arrived. Auburn. Father reunion. Tears of joy. Hands blessed. They found them, Marcus whispered. But not all pages ended in joy. September 1903. St. Family. Package lost. Trail cold. Virginia. Hearts broken. Patricia removed her glasses, eyes wet. They were children themselves, and they carried this weight. Over the next week, patterns unfolded like a hidden map, cross-referencing journal entries with census lists and church records. They pieced together an underground network stretching across Georgia and the Carolinas into Virginia, an invisible web held together by shop owners, pastors, mothers, and brave teenagers. Robert and Grace weren't anomalies. They were bridge builders. Their parents' grocery store served as a hub. Inventory ledgers secretly tracked missing children. Safe houses disguised as homes and businesses. The coded gestures, the hand on Grace's shoulder, these weren't symbols for posterity. They were survival, proof, password. Then they found it. October 12th, 1903. White men asking questions. Auburn network suspended. 2 weeks. Photograph protocol initiated. Patricia's voice trembled. Photograph protocol means this portrait wasn't just a keepsake. It was a passkey. Marcus nodded, breath unsteady. They must have carried copies with them. When arriving in a new city searching for a child, they showed the photo. Anyone familiar with the code would see the hand signal and know, these two can be trusted. Patricia closed the journal with trembling reverence. It explains everything. This photograph was not for memory. It was a tool, a shield, a door. This wasn't a casual family portrait. It was a document, a passport into a secret world. Marcus opened another file on his laptop, showing Patricia photographs he had collected from other families during earlier research. "Look at this," he said, enlarging a 1904 portrait of a young woman. Her hand rested on the back of a chair, fingers arranged not casually, but in a familiar pattern. Patricia leaned forward. "Another network member, perhaps. And if we can decode the pattern, we might be able to identify more. These photos might be everywhere, in archives, in personal collections, hiding in plain sight." They spent the afternoon studying each image in Marcus's database. 3 more showed subtle, deliberate hand signals, all from cities referenced in Grace's coded journal. As the sky darkened, Marcus's phone rang. It was Linda Henderson Carter. "Dr. Webb, I found something else. A letter from Grace to Robert, 1906. You need to see it." Grace's letter, 1906. The next morning, the letter lay between them on Linda's dining table, protected in a plastic sleeve, edges fragile with time. Marcus photographed each page while Patricia and Linda read aloud. "My dearest brother, Robert, I write to you from Birmingham with news both joyful and sorrowful. The Johnson children, all 4, have been found. They were working on a farm outside Montgomery, told they were orphans. When I showed their mother's photograph, the eldest, Sarah, fell to her knees, weeping. She is 12 now. She was 8 when they were taken. She thought her mother abandoned them. The farmer produced guardianship papers, but Brother Matthews proved they were forged. We leave tomorrow. Their mother will hold her children again after 4 years. But there has been cost. Sister Caroline, who sheltered us, was arrested yesterday for harboring vagrant children. Though free citizens, these children were stolen from their families. She faces trial next month. Her husband says she will not recant. She will not betray the network. Sometimes I wonder if we are winning anything at all. For every child we return, 10 more vanish. For every reunion, 20 parents search in vain. The law, the courts, society, all are built to keep us apart. But then I remember Sarah's face, the way she clutched her mother's photograph, the sound of hope breaking open like dawn. And I know we must continue, bridge by bridge, plank by plank, even when the river rises against us. Father says the store closed 3 days last week after white men asked questions. Mother is frightened, though she hides it well. I fear we endanger our family. Yet when I suggested we stop, Father refused. This is what we are called to do, he said. Hard things must still be done. The photograph we took has saved me in 4 cities. Contacts recognized the signal instantly. Sister Margaret said seeing our hands was like watching a flower bloom. She knew immediately I was one of them. Brother, I am tired. I am 17, and some days I feel ancient. But I am grateful for you, for our family, for every soul who risks everything so others might be whole again. Keep your hands ready. There is more work ahead. Your loving sister, Grace. When Patricia finished reading, the room fell into silence. Linda wiped her tears. Marcus blinked hard, overwhelmed. The letter transformed the photograph from historical evidence into living testimony. Proof of courage, grief, endurance. A ledger of love and defiance. The search for Sister Caroline. Over the following days, Marcus and Patricia searched court archives for Caroline Davis, the woman named in the letter. The story they uncovered was as powerful as the letter itself. Caroline Davis had been arrested in April 1906, charged with harboring vagrant children, a legal weapon commonly used against those who helped reunite families. Trial records revealed she refused to reveal the network's members, despite threats of imprisonment. Her husband, Thomas Davis, testified she was offering Christian charity to children in need. The jury deliberated less than an hour. Guilty, 6 months hard labor. A black newspaper wrote of her with fury and reverence, calling her a woman of exemplary character punished for compassion. But Birmingham did not abandon her. Patricia found a petition from May 1906, more than 200 signatures demanding her release. One name stood out, Brother Matthews, the same man who proved the Johnson guardianship papers false. They organized, Patricia whispered. They lost the trial, but not the fight. Marcus located another journal entry shortly afterward. Sister Caroline released early. Community pressure successful. Network stronger. New protocols created. We adapt. We survive. We continue. Caroline served 2 months instead of 6. The network learned, adjusted. Codes grew tighter. Communication became silent, visual, embedded in photographs like the one of Robert and Grace. Marcus also discovered Robert had once been arrested. 1905, charges dropped, but the fear was real. His parents tried to pull both children out of the work. Robert refused. There are children waiting for us. Fear can't stop us. Others were not as fortunate. Some were beaten. Some disappeared. One man died in custody. A woman fled the state, leaving her own children behind. And still, the journal continued. Through 1908, dozens of reunifications were recorded. Dozens of families made whole again. Every child returned was a victory against a world built to erase them. Every photograph a key. Every hand signal a lantern in the dark. They knew the risks, Patricia said quietly, and they did it anyway. That's the definition of courage. Marcus nodded, thinking of the photograph. Robert's hand resting on Grace's shoulder, fingers arranged with the precision of a message. What once seemed like an ordinary portrait was now a declaration of defiance. We exist. We resist. We will not allow you to break us apart. With Linda's permission, Marcus and Patricia began contacting historical societies and museums across the southeast, sharing the image and asking if anyone recognized similar hand signals in portraits from the early 20th century. Responses came slowly at first, then surged. A museum in Charleston sent 3 portraits showing hand signals that matched the pattern Patricia had catalogued. A historical society in Richmond sent a group photograph of 5 people, their hands resting on shoulders in deliberate variations of the same signal. A descendant in Savannah shared a 1904 family portrait where 2 members displayed unmistakable coded positions. Within 2 months, Marcus and Patricia had identified more than 40 photographs. Some were studio portraits like Robert and Grace's. Others were casual family scenes, church gatherings, community picnics. Each one carried the same silent language. Fingers placed, not casually, but purposefully. This wasn't just a local operation, Patricia said, pinning markers to a large regional map. This was multi-state, organized, sustained, and it ran for at least a decade, maybe more. Marcus began interviewing descendants of people in those photographs. Their stories gave life to what the journals and documents hinted at. One man in Atlanta, James Porter, spoke of his great-aunt, only 13 when she joined the network. Young enough to pass unnoticed, she delivered messages sewn into her dress hems or tucked inside book covers. A woman in Colombia recalled her grandmother's safe house, food, shelter, and coded handkerchief folds for instructions. The more Marcus learned, the clearer it became. This wasn't a scattered effort. It was a covert infrastructure, mobile, adaptive, deeply rooted in community intelligence. Patricia discovered records of a 1904 church meeting in Atlanta where leaders standardized gesture codes and protocols for interstate communication. Robert Thompson's name appeared in the notes. At 18 years old, he wasn't just participating, he was shaping strategy. Marcus thought back to the photograph, his expression solemn, his hand positioned with intent. He wasn't posing, he was recording a promise. Grace's journal abruptly stopped in December 1908. Marcus searched obsessively for answers. Census records showed the siblings alive in 1910, still living on Auburn Avenue. But the silence in the journal felt ominous. Then Linda called. "I found another letter, hidden in the journal's back cover. You need to see it." Marcus drove to Stone Mountain immediately. The letter, dated January 1909, was written in Robert's uneven hand. "To whoever reads Grace's journal, my sister can no longer write." He recounted their last mission, retrieving 2 stolen children from a textile mill. The escape, the pursuit, the men on horseback. Grace standing between them and the children, refusing to move. The beating that nearly killed her. The bystanders who intervened. Her permanent hand injury. Her resolve unbroken. She was 17 years old. Robert wrote that the network continued. Stronger, wiser, still risking everything. He asked only that future readers remember them. Shopkeepers, teachers, carpenters, children who refused to accept families being torn apart. "Look at our photograph," he wrote. "See how my hand rests on my sister's shoulder. That is our promise. Safe passage, sworn oath, protection." 6 months later, the exhibition opened at the Atlanta History Center. Hands Remember, the ELLC Family Reunification Network. 1900-1910. Robert and Grace's portrait was the centerpiece. Beside it, Grace's journal, Robert's final letter, 43 other coded photographs, hand-drawn maps, clothing with sewn-in message pockets, church meeting notes, oral testimonies from descendants projected on a looping screen. Visitors leaned in close to study the photograph. Some traced the gesture with their own fingers. Some gasped. Some cried. An elderly woman approached Marcus. "My grandmother used to make that hand sign. I never knew what it meant. Now, I think she was part of them." Variations of that moment happened again and again, people recognizing fragments of family memory, suddenly made whole. Patricia spoke that evening. What Robert and Grace did was more than rescue children. They defended the right to family. They defied a system built to sever bloodlines. Their photograph may look ordinary, but it is one of the most radical political statements of its time. Marcus stood alone at the display after the crowd thinned. Robert's hand still rested on Grace's shoulder, as if across a century it continued to guard her. Safe passage, sworn promise, protection. They kept their promise. And 121 years later, their hands are finally remembered.